So we continue our discovery of the brain and its impact on learning and change, engagement, and conversation. And this week I'm also continuing the discovery of the learning pipeline. The learning pipeline describes that process where we integrate something new into our brain that changes who we are, what we know, or what we do. And the learning pipeline is described by the sensory input that's captured by attention into working memory, and then through the activity in working memory passed eventually to long-term memory. In fact, we should probably call long-term memory longer-term memory, because who knows how long it's there. Some long-term memory stores things only for a short amount of time. This week in particular, after our discussion of attention and then an introduction to working memory through cognitive load last time, and if you missed that, I'll place a link in the comments below, I wanted to more broadly identify this thing called working memory. Attention and working memory are the bottlenecks, the weak points in that pipeline. We get loads of capacity of inbound sensory information. We have loads of capacity in our long-term memory, but our weak links are our attention. Our attention only captures about 1% or less of the inbound sensory data. And our working memory is equally small in its capacity. And I'll talk about that, if not today, over the subsequent few videos I'll put together. So working memory then, we talk about it. Sometimes we incorrectly identify it as short-term memory. I've put together a bit of a model to help explain to you what working memory could be. Now, it's not hugely scientific. It is based on neuroscience, but like all models, it will be wrong. And the complexity of the brain in particular will smash any model that we come up with. But think about working memory as a bit like a factory. And in factories there's a process and a goal. Stuff gets made or created or done. To do that, we need to warehouse stuff. So the parts that make the process, the parts that we use to process and build something, are stored in some sort of inventory. We also need to plan what we're going to do, and we also need to cache or hold those parts in some part of our manufacturing process so that they're quickly and easily accessible. That's all managed by a supervisory process or even a supervisory person. So that's a little bit like working memory. Working memory has this executive control that partly manages attention and partly manages what it is we're doing with working memory. There's a part that puts stuff back in long-term memory and recalls stuff from long-term memory. It's a bit like warehousing, if that makes sense. And when we recall something, either from long-term memory or from sensory input, we cache it. We try and keep it in that cache for some time. If I give you a 6-digit PIN to remember, you'll probably rehearse that, and that's that caching. You're holding that in memory. If you're holding a set of instructions that someone has given you, 3, 4, 5 sets of instructions, then that's the caching part. When we're working in the working memory, that's the processing part. That's where we're actually manufacturing or manipulating or doing something in our brain. So those 4 key working parts, just to summarize that, we've got the processing bit that does the work. We've got the caching bit that holds stuff for 10 to 20 seconds while we start to process it maybe. We get this storage and retrieval, the warehousing piece, and we get the planning piece where we assess in the future what we're going to need and what we're going to do. And that's all managed by a 5th element, the executive control of this working memory. So today, just to start this journey about working memory, I wanted to present a way of you starting to understand what working memory really is. Now, working memory is not in one place in the brain. In reality, it's distributed into many regions and functions of different parts of the brain, but ultimately, working memory is doing this piece of work around the manipulation, the storage, the retrieval, the planning, and then ultimately passing something back. Again, to come back to this idea of a manufacturing plant, we construct something bigger, we take the individual parts, and maybe we make an engine, which is a component of a car, and then we pass that engine back as a bigger, more improved bit of knowledge, skill or understanding, if you like, back into our long-term memory. I'll talk more about this during the week, but I will be exploring this in a session this Thursday, 4 p.m. GMT +8, where I'll look at, in particular, attention and working memory and build that into a way of making sense, making meaning, and making a difference. Again, details in the comments below. Hope that helps. Grow well.